episode 9 of the Write Right podcast, your weekly pep talk for living the writing life. I am Elon.
I'm John.
I'm Craig.
And this
I'm Elayna.
And this month we have a very special guest, Elayna Mae Darcy, who will be joining us for the next 4 weeks, at the very least, to talk books and life and writing and how those things intersect. Elayna, why don't we just get started? We want to find out everything about you. Please tell us about yourself, starting with how long have you been writing fiction?
Well, hi. Yes, I'm Elayna Mae Darcy. I have been writing fiction officially since I was about 13. That was when I attempted to write my first book, which was total crap, but that's how it goes. I've gone to school for film and media, so I've kind of branched out from writing just like fiction books to writing screenplays and short films and various other things. I also do a podcast called Speak Beastie, which is a Fantastic Beast podcast because, as I like to say, I'm a very professional fangirl. Work for MuggleNet.com. But yeah, fiction writing is my favorite thing. It's if you could only do one thing with the rest of your life, what would you do? It would be write stories.
So you said you run Muggle, or you don't run MuggleNet. You work with the MuggleNet folks, and you have
goodness.
you are the only person behind MuggleNet, is what I understand now.
Single-handedly,
yeah,
no. Oh goodness, no. Yeah, we have a team of almost, I think, with all of our interns and all of our regular staff, I think we're almost like 80 or 90 people run that website, and all volunteer. So
whoa, I didn't realize it was that big of an operation.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's the website itself has been around. We'll be 18 years old this October. So started in 1999, and I've been on there as just like a nerdy little fangirl since I was about 11 or 12. So the fact that I now work for them is kind of just like a dreams do come true sort of thing. But I've been with them almost 4 years now.
Would you say that that all those things kind of like those timings were all together, like you starting to want to write fiction, you joining MuggleNet, you reading Harry Potter, essentially? Is that like sort of what kicked you off into wanting to be a writer?
I mean, J.K. Rowling is definitely, like, if I had to name one influencer for why I write, it's definitely her. I read that book when I was 8 years old, and before then, like, I liked to read, but I liked those books, books with lots of pictures. Like, I was engaged with stories, but not so much like the ones that had a lot of words in them. And then my sister was like, you should definitely read this book. You'll really like it. It's about this wizard boy. And my sister and I were really into, like, magical stuff. So when she asked me to read it, I was like, okay, sure. And that was just kind of like the start of the rest of my life. I got into those, and all within that span of a couple years of, getting interested in Harry Potter. And my sister also writes a lot. She actually does a webcomic now, which is pretty cool. But really got me interested in that topic of writing. And so when I was 13, I was just like, oh, well, maybe I should write my own book. And I came up with it in like my math class. And it's actually the book that I'm like still working on right now. So it was sort of all those very early years of, going into teenagehood where I sort of became a raging fangirl for things. And I was like, hey, if I like consuming all this stuff, maybe I should try creating some of this stuff.
Totally. I had not the same experience with Harry Potter. Like, I read it and it didn't make me want to write books, but it made me want to read more. It's interesting though, because I think a lot of people that like the Harry Potter was a turning point in a lot of people's lives. Either if they were already reading, fantasy, it made it cool to do so. And if they weren't, they started. Like, did either of you guys have that experience, John, Craig, with Harry Potter? Do you care for Harry Potter?
I read the first book and I struggled to get through it, and I've not picked up the second book.
Nice.
I was forced to watch the movies, all of them, and about movie 3 is when I started to get into it. But I'm not a fantasy fan in general.
Yeah. You're a Star Trek fan.
It wouldn't be your cup of tea then.
No, I'm all about the Star Trek. We won't talk about how many costumes I have in the closet.
Yes, we should.
No,
that sounds awesome.
Next episode, maybe. A future episode.
How many? It'll be our cosplay episode.
There we go.
Oh,
Well,
please invite me to that one.
We'll can of worms that.
Yeah. I loved Harry Potter, but when I first read it, it was to prove that I would hate it. Because I had heard all these people raving about it, and I'm like, this is like, it's a kid's book. This can't be that good. And so I kind of read it resentfully. I didn't even read. I read the third book first because it just happened to be around, and I picked it up more or less to prove that I wouldn't like it, or I would find some flaw or some reason why people were raving about it. And then I couldn't put it down. It was so good. So after that, I ended up going and just buying all the books. Book 5 hadn't come out yet when I picked those up, and I read right through, couldn't stop, and became a fan of the series. Like, there's just something about how she tells stories, and even with the Fantastic Beasts movie, which she's writing the screenplays for those, like her ability to just conjure up the right storytelling.
Yeah, she's a
awesome.
master, in my opinion. I know that it's not a universally held thing, but a lot of people seem to think so. It's interesting when a story like that can have such a large cultural impact. And it's obviously not the first time that happened. Lord of the Rings, Dune, The Wheel of Time. There's so many series that have had these like sweeping effects. Like for me,
there was even a study done that said that it was a study done of like kids who've read Harry Potter versus kids who haven't, and the reason that they were trying to see like the correlation was like kids who've read Harry Potter are actually more into activism than kids who haven't. Like it actually made a generation like more conscious of like doing things like that, which is really crazy.
That's pretty amazing. I don't know what inspired. Like, is there a book that you read, Craig, that like inspired you to write?
This is going to sound a little bit strange, but my writing started as an abstract form of revenge. Because in grade 8, we had to write some stories for English class, and I worked so hard on them. And then the day I was ready to hand them in, the teacher said, "Oh, you don't have to hand these in. It's just for practice." And like I was like one of those. I had 100% in English. Like I was hardcore. And I was so pissed off that I went home and I wrote like 5 sequels to my stories, and it just snowballed from there. And that's how it started. It was revenge. I think I got my revenge by now.
Well, what you write like hundreds of thousands of words a year now, so your revenge is like an ongoing campaign.
I hope that teacher feels every word that I write.
You should just start sending.
I actually
your stories.
I have a villain in my story who's named after an English teacher that told me I couldn't write. So
shows them.
Get that revenge.
Stick it to them.
Yeah.
So we've kind of gotten into like what inspires you, but like what? Let's switch gears completely because I'm really good at hosting stuff and connecting topics. So like what are your like there's so many different writing social circles online. You mentioned that you're a part of MuggleNet, which is the largest Harry Potter fan site, right?
Yeah, and I think we're the oldest too. Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past. I mean, you're able to.
J.K. Rowling knows who we are.
I'm sure she does. Your
Pottermore
website's old enough to vote in the United
fun.
States, I think.
What was that?
Your website's old enough to vote in the United States?
Yeah, we are. It was really fun this past October when we had our anniversary because we were 17, so we were of legal age in the wizarding world. It was great. Yeah, we can now cast magic when outside of school. It's pretty great.
That's very fancy. But like, where else do you like to hang out online? What other writing affiliated networks are you connected?
Goodness, well, I mean, the default is Twitter. Like, Twitter is just. It's such like a wonderful, beautiful place, but also such a cesspool, and you really have to like pick your battles on there. But I go to Twitter a lot because that's actually where I've met a lot of my writing friends. Because I'm a very active participant in NaNoWriMo, and so a lot of NaNoWriMo people engage on the Twitterverse. So I'm on there a lot. I'm on Tumblr a lot. But other than MuggleNet, probably NaNoWriMo probably be the biggest. Probably the biggest place that I frequent as a writer, just because the same year that I started writing that story, 2004, was actually the year I did my first NaNoWriMo. NaNoWriMo every year except for 2012 since then. So this November will be I love the community surrounding that because it's like the people that are part of it are people who are just really, really excited about writing. And there are people who recognize that, like, you know, writing sometimes can't get yourself out of your own head. You just are trying so hard to be a perfectionist because you want it to be the best it can be, that you will then sometimes never get something to paper. But the NaNoWriMo community is kind of the exact opposite of that. It's, you know, you can fix it later, but you can't fix it if you don't have something to fix. Like that community a lot. That's probably where I spend most of my time.
Right on. Yeah. Nano is a really, really cool way for writers to meet each other. I have tried to Nano several times and I've never won. So I've stopped making my goal to write 50,000 words. I've made my goal to to write every day, or you know, to hit a word count that's below 50,000. And I think that's much more attainable for me because I haven't really figured out how to become a more consistent writer. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of struggle with that. Do either of you guys Nano, or are you just off of that train?
I try to Nano. I do it every once in a well. I try to do it every year. I've completed it once, maybe. I don't know. For someone that writes upwards of 400,000 words a year, I have really bad productivity during Nano.
Dude, that's crazy and awesome. I look up to you so much now. That's my lifetime Nano, is I've written about 400,000 words on Nano in like 13 years. So that's
with Nano, they have I mean, I know they have things that go on through the year, like they have a revision month, but is it just November when it's like that's the hard 50,000 word output month, and then the rest of the year is kind of the revision part of writing that novel you would have worked on?
Yeah, the way that they usually structure it is so for a while there was something that would happen in April called Script Frenzy, and the idea was that it would be like NaNoWriMo for screenwriters. But that ended a couple years ago and changed over to being called Camp NaNoWriMo. So now the three main events that they do each year are what I always call NaNoWriMo proper, which is, you know, November, the goal is 50,000. You have to get to that goal in that month. But then in the months of April and July, they do Camp NaNoWriMo. And for that, it's the same idea, but you set your word goal. So I think they have you have a minimum goal of, I think, 10,000 is what you can input on the site. But you can write anywhere, you know, upwards of that. I've had friends who've done 100,000. I don't know how they do that or how their fingers are still attached to their hands. But you know, it's cool though, because it kind of gives you, I've tried Camp now, I think 3 times. I tried it both times last year and in July of the year before that, and I didn't finish any of them. I don't know if it's just something about the creative energy of November that actually gets me to finish. I'm going to be doing it this year, both camps and November. But of all the times I've done the November one, I've now finished it 6 years. I've completed it 6 years and not completed it 6 years, and sat out one of them. So
50% is a pretty
I have a
good
50% success rate.
Elon, to get back to the question you asked us, I mean, I've tried Nano. Actually, 1,000 Roads started as a Nano novel. I think, I didn't reach the 50,000 word goal. I think I got to 20,000 or so in that month. But I ended up writing all the way through until August, and I had a 150,000 word draft, and
wow,
didn't know what the heck to do with it. I spent a year trying to revise it, and then that was when I switched to Blood Dawn. I put it away to write something different. So I've come back to it, and I'm working through it again. I found that actually getting into Blood Dawn is when I got involved with Author Accelerator. They're the service that I use for my coaching.
Yeah.
And what I like about that is it's every week. It's kind of like weekly milestones. So for me, I find as long as I have some accountability and I'm moving forward, that's okay. I find if I don't have that, I kind of go into this wave mode where things happen when they happen, and so that's one of the things about Nano. I think there's a spirit to what that is. And I think, Elayna, you mentioned
it's like this
momentum.
positive accountability, you know? You don't feel guilty, you feel motivated to reach those goals.
Yeah.
I don't know. I always go into Nano with really high hopes. and it never works out.
Yeah, it's hard when, especially like if you aren't friends with a lot of people that do it, I think it's a lot harder. Because I mean that's really why like I stopped doing it for so long. Like those first couple years that I did it, my sister lived at home with me, and so her and I were constantly like talking to each other about it and encouraging each other. And then those late high school and all of college years where I didn't have any friends who were doing it were the years that I failed miserably, and the one year I didn't even try. But then 2 years ago, I think it was 2014 was the year I got back to doing it. And with that one, it was like I got re-involved with it online. I met a lot of people through Twitter. I had several friends from MuggleNet who were doing it, and so it kind of just totally changed the game, and people I knew who were doing it who could be supportive. Having that group of people around you who are constantly like, you'll beat yourself up and go, "Ugh, I only got 200 words done today." And they'll be like, that's 200 words more than you had.
Yeah.
And that's the constant thing that I see with NaNoWriMo. It's, everybody beats themselves up about their word count, but no one else will ever beat them up for it. They will lift them up. So I think that's why, despite like, I just keep coming back to it because that positive reinforcement is just really helpful for me as a writer.
Totally. So I want to switch gears again to your newest project with some other authors that we're friends with. Can you tell us a little bit about IndiePen Inc.?
Yes, I can. So IndiePen Inc. is a website started by myself, Christine Brennicke, or C. Brennicke, and Rebecca S. Lieber. The three of us met through a site called InkShares. And we just kind of became really close friends, and we were looking at just like different things that we saw in the writing world and on blogs, and there were just certain things where like there's not a place where we can get all of these resource links in one place, and we just kind of took all of like the holes that we saw and things that were missing from different writing websites that we would frequent, and we're like, let's fill in those holes and make this writing community. So, our website says, we are a multiverse of writing resources, and we're still new, but we have a lot of different things coming up, one of which is going to be the Researchatorium, which is going to have tons of different links for how to properly research, where you can find different sources for research, because a lot of times, like, I feel creative writers, like, they're so busy focusing on the creativity aspect, often like get a chance to learn how to research or know where they should go if they do need to do research. So we're going to hopefully serve as that. But we also then have like some more, fun and creative kind of things. Like we have one show that's a web show called Drink Drunk, and talk about books and nerdy stuff, which are my two favorite things at the same time. And then soon, I'm not sure when the episode will be released, how close we'll be to releasing this podcast, but I will actually be hosting a podcast called Story Slayers, and our tagline for that is "Slaying the Patriarchy, One Story at a Time." So it's about it's about women writers and women characters and just women creators in general. Some of the episodes we have planned are one about women in Hollywood, one about like women in Star Wars. So we're going to cover like a range of topics, but it's really just kind of like our baby and our writing community, which is why we released it on Valentine's Day. So that was fun.
That's sweet.
Yeah. So that was a little rambly, but yeah, it's IndiePen Inc. in a nutshell.
Well, right on, folks. That's IndiePen Inc. INK.com, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. IndiePenInc.com.
And for some of the listeners who might be listening to this having come from, I share a link from my blog. I'm actually going to put a graphic on the blog sidebar, so you can probably soon see that link there, clicking to IndiePen Inc. So.
Yeah, and you can find one of the things we do currently have up on the site is we have a bookmark section, which links to all kinds of different, like friends projects that we have and stuff. And you guys can find links to, Story Perfect Editing on there. You can find links to John's blog, my blog, other people's blogs. So it's really just kind of going to be like a repository of lots of fun writerly stuff, whether that's informative or whether that's creative. It's just going to kind of be like a one-stop shop for all that.
Well, that is wonderful. I'm currently falling apart in a pile of tissues, and I apologize for the
Oh,
nasal quality of my voice, which it has just assumed. Uh,
not alone with that today.
I will subtract some of this from the final mix of the podcast episode. Do you have like a writing prompt, or perhaps like is there a prompt or some kind of exercise that you like to do, Elayna, when you're struggling, looking for something to write? I can't believe I sound like this.
Yeah, I'm gonna need you to do every podcast episode like that, or
Well, I could probably arrange that.
Oh God. Yeah, let's so this isn't quite a prompt, but it's actually something a friend suggested to me one time, and every so often, like this, it'll come back to me, and it'll be like the most helpful thing that I can possibly do. Is when you're getting stuck with a scene, try to work through the scene backwards. Think about where you want the scene to end up and be like, okay, so I know that this person has to be at this point by the end of this. And when you do that and you kind of come to that point where you're like, okay, let me start at the end, you have to then think about like, well, what led to that end? Oh, well, this has to happen before that happens. Okay, well, then once that happens, what needs to cause that? And they recommended this to me, and the scene that I had been stuck on for 2.5 days, I got through in about maybe an hour or two, because I was like, oh, I was just looking at it from a totally different way. So that's a method I always recommend to people if they're looking for a new way to approach it. And another thing I always think is a fun thing to try if you're getting stuck is try to write in a way that you normally don't. And what I mean by that is if you're a person who types, try to handwrite something. Or if you're a person who handwrites, try to type it.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much for joining us for the next few episodes. We really appreciate it. We're excited to have you. And tune in next week, listeners, for us to talk about, I believe we're talking about where we write. So that's very exciting. We're really looking forward to that.
Woo-hoo.
And join us next time. Thanks.